The diner smelled like burnt coffee and broken dreams at 3 a.m. I wiped down the same spot on the counter for the third time, watching the circular motion of my cloth erase nothing. Not the stain, not my exhaustion, not the fact that my rent was 2 weeks overdue. The fluorescent lights above flickered with their usual arrhythmic buzz, casting sickly shadows across the red vinyl booths that had seen better decades. Outside, rain hammered against the windows, turning the New York street into a blur of neon and darkness. My feet ached. Everything ached. The kind of bone-deep tiredness that comes from working double shifts 6 days a week, from smiling at men who snapped their fingers at you, from pretending you didn't hear the crude comments whispered just loud enough to make you feel small. I was invisible here, just another waitress in a stained apron, another face that people looked through rather than at. The bell above the door chimed. I didn't look up immediately. Why would I? It was always the same. Drunks looking for coffee, lonely people seeking fluorescent companionship, taxi drivers killing time between fares. But something made me pause. Maybe it was the sudden silence that fell over the 3 other patrons scattered throughout the diner. Maybe it was the way the air itself seemed to shift, growing heavier, more electric. When I finally lifted my eyes, my breath caught. 3 men stood in the doorway, rain dripping from expensive coats that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. But it was the man in the center who made my hands still on the counter, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair slicked back from a face that could have been carved from marble, beautiful in that dangerous, untouchable way that made you think of fallen angels and Greek tragedies. His suit was immaculate, charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes that whispered money, old money, blood money. The 2 men flanking him were clearly security. I'd seen enough movies to recognize the bulge of shoulder holsters beneath their jackets, the way their eyes swept the room with mechanical precision, cataloging exits and threats. They moved like predators, but they moved for him. He walked toward the back booth, the one in the corner with a view of both the door and the kitchen. Of course he did. Men like him didn't sit with their backs exposed. His cologne reached me before he did, something dark and expensive that didn't belong in a place that reeked of grease and desperation. Bergamot, leather, something else I couldn't name but that made my pulse quicken traitorously. "Coffee," one of the security guards said. Not asked. Said. I nodded, grabbing the pot with shaking hands I didn't want to acknowledge. As I approached their booth, I kept my eyes down, a survival instinct I'd learned young. Don't look too long. Don't be memorable. Don't exist more than necessary. But I felt his gaze on me like a physical touch. Rough night? His voice was low, smooth, with the barest trace of an accent I couldn't quite place. Italian, maybe, or something older, more refined. I poured coffee into 3 cups, watching the dark liquid swirl. Every night's rough at 3 a.m. A mistake. I shouldn't have responded, shouldn't have let my exhaustion make me forget the rules of invisibility. When I finally looked up, his eyes were on me, gray like storm clouds, like gunmetal, like something beautiful and deadly. There was an intensity there that made me want to step back, but I was frozen, caught like a butterfly pinned to velvet. "You work here long?" he asked, and something in his tone suggested this wasn't small talk. This was reconnaissance. Long enough? I set the pot down, turning to leave. Wait. I shouldn't have stopped. Every instinct screamed at me to keep walking, to maintain the blessed anonymity that kept people like me safe from people like him. But my body betrayed me, feet rooting to the cracked linoleum. "What's your name?" "Elena," I whispered, and immediately regretted giving him even that small piece of myself. He smiled then, a slight curve of lips that didn't reach his eyes, but somehow made him more devastating. "Elena," he repeated, tasting my name like wine. I know who you are," I interrupted, then immediately wanted to swallow my tongue. Because I did know. Everyone in this neighborhood knew. Dmitry Volkov. The Volkov family controlled everything from the waterfront to Midtown. Gambling, construction, waste management, and things people didn't speak about in polite company. His father had built an empire. Dmitry had turned it into a kingdom. Ruthless. Brilliant. Untouchable. And I just admitted I knew exactly who he was. His expression shifted. Surprise, Then something darker, more calculating. Interesting, he murmured. And yet you're not afraid. I was terrified. My heart hammered so hard I was certain he could hear it, but I lifted my chin anyway, channeling every ounce of stubborn pride my grandmother had beaten into me. Should I be? Most people are. Most people probably have more sense than me. That smile again, wider this time. One of his guards shifted uncomfortably, clearly unused to anyone speaking to their boss with anything less than trembling deference. But Dmitri just leaned back in the booth, studying me with those storm-gray eyes like I was a puzzle he intended to solve. "Go back to work, Elena," he said finally, dismissing me with a wave of his hand that probably cost more than my car, the ring on his finger catching the fluorescent light, gold and onyx. I fled. Back behind the counter, I tried to steady my breathing, willing my hands to stop shaking as I refilled sugar dispensers and pretended I couldn't feel his gaze following me. The other customers had already left. Smart people knew when to make themselves scarce. It was just me, Dmitri Volkov, his 2 guards, and Jerry the night cook, who was pointedly ignoring everything happening in the dining room. 20 minutes passed. 30. They didn't leave. Dmitri made phone calls in rapid Russian, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in my chest even across the room. His guards remained silent, vigilant, occasionally murmuring into their own phones or earpieces. I was refilling the napkin dispensers when the bell above the door chimed again. This time, the energy was different. Wrong. 2 men entered, and everything about them screamed danger. Not the controlled, calculated danger of Dmitri Volkov. This was something wilder, more desperate. The first was tall and wiry, with a scar running from his temple to his jaw. The second was shorter, stockier, with the kind of dead eyes I'd seen on men who'd crossed lines they could never uncross. They didn't sit, didn't order, just stood near the door, hands in their pockets. Dmitri's guards tensed immediately, hands moving toward their jackets. Dmitri himself went utterly still, the kind of stillness that comes before violence, before thunder, before the world splits open. "Volkov," the scarred man said, his accent thick. "Eastern European, maybe Ukrainian. You've been difficult to find. That's intentional, Sergei." Dmitri's voice was ice. "You're not welcome in my city." "Your city?" Sergei laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Your father's city, maybe, but the old man's dead, and you're just the boy playing dress-up in daddy's suits." The tension ratcheted up so fast I could barely breathe. This was a challenge, a threat, and I was trapped in the middle of it. "Leave," Dmitri said quietly. "While you still can. We came to deliver a message from Kiev. They're not happy about the shipment you intercepted. They want—" I didn't hear the rest because I saw it. The glint of metal, as the shorter man pulled a gun from his jacket. Time seemed to slow, crystallizing into individual moments of horror. The gun rising, Dmitri's guards reaching for their weapons, the shorter man's finger tightening on the trigger. And I was moving. I didn't think, didn't calculate, didn't consider that I was just a waitress who should duck and hide and let these men settle their violent business. I just saw the gun pointed at the booth, at Dmitri Volkov, at the man who'd looked at me like I was visible, and my body reacted. I lunged across the space between the counter and his booth, grabbing the expensive fabric of his jacket with both hands and yanking him down with all my strength, all my desperation, all my adrenaline-fueled terror. We tumbled under the table just as the gunshot cracked through the air. The bullet hit the vinyl backrest where his head had been seconds before, stuffing exploding in a cloud of foam and fabric. More gunshots followed, Dmitri's guards returning fire, the diner erupting into chaos and violence and the acrid smell of gunpowder. But under the table, pressed against the sticky floor with Dmitri Volkov's body covering mine, protective, possessive, I could only feel the thundering of 2 heartbeats, his breath hot against my neck, and the terrifying realization that I'd just saved a monster's life. His hand came up to cup the back of my head, fingers threading through my hair with surprising gentleness. Against my ear, his voice was rough, shaken. "Don't move. Don't make a sound." Above us, the violence continued. Shouting in Russian and Ukrainian, More gunshots. The crash of furniture. Then running footsteps. The bell above the door chiming frantically, and finally, silence. "Boss." One of the guards' voices, tight with tension. "They're gone." Sergei took a round to the shoulder. "They won't get far." "Witnesses?" Dimitri's question vibrated through his chest into mine. "Cook's gone. Ran out the back. No one else." "Good. Clean this up. He paused, and I felt his focus shift back to me, still pressed beneath him on the filthy diner floor. "I want this place closed for renovations. Buy the building if you have to, and get the car. Boss, we need to move. They might come back with the car. Now." The guards left. I heard the door chime, heard the rain outside growing louder in their absence. And still, Dimitri didn't move, his weight pinning me, his hand still cradling my head like something precious, something breakable. "Elena," he said finally, my name a rough whisper in the new quiet. "Look at me." I didn't want to. Looking at him meant acknowledging what had just happened, what I'd done, what invisible line I'd just crossed. But his free hand came to my chin, tilting my face up with inexorable gentleness until I had no choice. His eyes were molten silver in the dim light beneath the table, and what I saw there made my breath stop entirely. Not gratitude, not simple appreciation, something far more dangerous, more consuming. Recognition, possession, claiming. "You saved my life," he said, each word deliberate. "I didn't think, you threw yourself in front of a bullet for me." His thumb brushed my cheekbone, and I shivered. "Why?" "I don't know. It was the truth. Instinct. Instinct," he repeated, tasting the word. Then his expression shifted, hardened into something that made me think of chains and cages and birds with clipped wings. "You're coming with me." "What?" "No, I can't." "It wasn't a request, Elena." He pulled us both up, his hands still on me, one at my waist, one cupping my face. Around us, the diner looked like a war zone, blood on the floor, bullet holes in the walls. My life, what little I had of it, shattered into 1,000 pieces. "They saw you, Sergei and his man. They saw you save me. Which means you're now a target. Which means you're mine to protect. I don't need—" "You don't understand." He leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching mine, his voice dropping to something dark and absolute. "I protect what's mine, Elena. And whether you like it or not, the moment you pulled me under that table, the moment you chose my life over your safety, you became mine." Outside, a black SUV pulled up, bulletproof and gleaming even in the rain. I should have fought harder. That's what I told myself as Dimitri guided me toward the SUV with a hand at the small of my back, possessive, unyielding, burning through the thin fabric of my uniform like a brand. I should have screamed, "Run," called the police. But my legs were shaking too badly, my mind still replaying the sound of gunshots, the feeling of his body covering mine, the certainty that I'd almost watched someone die, that I'd almost died myself. The rain soaked through my clothes within seconds, cold and merciless, but Dimitri's hand never left me. One of his guards opened the rear door, and before I could process what was happening, I was inside the vehicle. Leather seats, tinted windows, and the lingering scent of his cologne mixing with gun oil and something metallic I didn't want to identify. Dimitri slid in beside me, too close, his thigh pressed against mine in the confined space. The door closed with a heavy thunk that sounded like a cell door slamming shut. "Drive," he commanded, and the SUV pulled away from the curb, leaving behind the only life I'd known. I stared out the window, watching the familiar streets blur past. The diner disappeared into the rain-soaked darkness. My apartment building, 3 blocks away, with its broken elevator and water-stained ceiling, passed by like a ghost. Everything I owned was in that tiny studio. My grandmother's jewelry box, the books I'd collected from thrift stores, the laptop I'd saved 6 months to buy. "My things," I whispered, my voice cracking. "I need to get my things." "Already being handled," Dimitri said, his attention fixed on his phone, fingers moving across the screen with practiced efficiency. "You'll have everything by morning." The casual certainty in his voice ignited something hot and furious in my chest. "You can't just—" "I can." He looked up then. those gray eyes pinning me in place. And I am. Your landlord will receive 6 months' rent as compensation for breaking your lease. Your belongings will be packed and moved to a secure location. Jerry will find an envelope in his locker tomorrow with enough money to forget tonight ever happened. The building owner will accept a very generous offer by noon. This," he gestured vaguely at the space between us, "is already done, Elena. Fighting it won't change anything. You don't own me." "No," he agreed, something dark flickering across his face. "But I own everything else. And right now, everything else is trying to kill you because of me." The reality of it hit me like ice water. Those men, Sergei and his companion, they'd seen my face, seen me pull Dmitri to safety. In their world, that made me, what, a witness? A liability? A target? My hands started shaking again. I pressed them against my thighs, trying to stop the tremors. But Dmitri noticed. Of course he noticed. He seemed to notice everything. "You're safe," he said, his voice dropping to something almost gentle. "I give you my word." The word of a criminal? The question came out more bitter than I intended. His jaw tightened. The word of a man who keeps his promises. Always. He reached out, and I flinched before I could stop myself. His hand paused mid-air, something that might have been hurt flashing through his expression before it hardened into stone. "I'm not going to hurt you, Elena. I'm the only thing standing between you and a bullet right now." I knew he was right. Hated that he was right. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe. Somewhere they'd never dare look for you." The SUV turned onto the Manhattan Bridge, leaving Brooklyn behind. The city sprawled before us, a constellation of lights cutting through the rain and darkness. I'd lived in New York my entire life, but had rarely crossed into Manhattan. It was a different world, one where people like me didn't belong. Where waitresses in stained aprons were invisible even when you looked directly at them, but I wasn't invisible anymore. Dmitri Volkov had seen me, and somehow, impossibly, that made me the most visible person in the world. We drove for 20 minutes in silence, broken only by the drum of rain on metal and the occasional murmur from the guards in the front seat. Dmitri made 3 phone calls, all in Russian, all clipped and authoritative. I caught enough to understand he was mobilizing resources, calling in favors, tightening whatever web of power and violence he controlled. Finally, the SUV pulled up to a building that made my breath catch. It was one of those pre-war apartment buildings on the Upper East Side. The kind with a doorman in a uniform and lobby chandeliers that cost more than most people's houses. The kind of place I'd only seen in movies. "Come," Dmitri said, already moving. The doorman opened my door before I could reach for the handle. He didn't look at me, not with surprise or judgment or curiosity, just the blank professional courtesy of someone well paid to mind their own business. One of Dmitri's guards preceded us into the lobby while the other followed behind, creating a human shield. The elevator was all mirrors and brass. I caught sight of myself and barely recognized the woman staring back. Hair plastered to her skull, mascara smudged beneath her eyes, uniform soaked through and clinging to her body. I looked like a drowned rat. Dmitri somehow still looked immaculate despite the rain, despite having thrown himself on top of me on a filthy diner floor. The elevator rose smoothly, silently. When it stopped, there was only one door. A penthouse, of course. Everything in Dmitri Volkov's world was extremes, absolutes. The apartment was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, furniture that belonged in magazines, art on the walls that I suspected were originals. Everything was clean lines and muted colors, grays and blacks and deep blues, like living inside a storm cloud, beautiful and cold and completely impersonal. "The guest room is down that hall," Dmitri said, shrugging out of his ruined jacket. There was blood on his shirt, not his own, I realized with a sick lurch. "Second door on the left. There are clothes in the closet, toiletries in the bathroom, everything you need." I stood frozen in the entrance, water pooling around my feet on the hardwood floor. "How long?" "How long what?" "How long do I have to stay here?" He turned to face me fully, and in the warm light of his apartment, he looked younger than I'd thought. Maybe early 30s, though there was something ancient in those eyes. Something that had seen too much, done too much. Until it's safe. Until I've handled Sergei and anyone else who might think you're a weakness they can exploit. I'm not your weakness. You saved my life." He crossed the space between us in 3 strides, suddenly too close, crowding me against the closed door. "Do you understand what that means in my world? You put yourself between me and death. That creates a debt, a bond, something that can't be broken by wanting it to be different." I could feel the heat of him, smell the rain and cologne, and something underneath that was just him, male and dangerous and intoxicating. I didn't ask for a bond, neither did I. His hand came up, and this time I didn't flinch when he touched my face, his fingers tracing the curve of my jaw with devastating gentleness. "But here we are, Elena, tied together by bullets and blood and something I don't have a name for yet." My heart hammered against my ribs. "This is insane." "Yes," he agreed, his thumb brushing across my lower lip. "It is." For a moment, we just stood there, the mafia boss and the waitress, predator and prey, 2 people who should never have existed in the same universe, let alone the same room. Then Dmitri stepped back, breaking the spell, his expression shuddering into something more controlled. "Get some rest," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "We'll talk more in the morning. Victor will be outside your door. If you need anything, ask him. I'm a prisoner. You're protected." He turned toward what I assumed was his bedroom, then paused. "And, Elena, don't try to leave. There are 5 armed guards in this building, cameras on every exit, and nowhere in this city you could run that I wouldn't find you within an hour. Not a threat, just a fact." He disappeared into the shadows of the hallway, leaving me alone in his beautiful, cold apartment with nothing but my fear and the growing, horrifying realization that some part of me, some small, traitorous part, hadn't wanted him to let go. I didn't sleep. How could I? I lay in the guest room bed, which was larger and more comfortable than any bed I'd ever slept in, and stared at the ceiling, my mind racing through everything that had happened. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the gun, heard the shots, felt Dimitri's weight on top of me, protective and possessive. Around 4 a.m., I gave up and went to the window. The city sprawled below, still awake, still breathing. Somewhere out there, Sergei was wounded and angry. Somewhere, Jerry was probably getting drunk to forget what he'd witnessed. Somewhere, my old life was continuing without me, and I wasn't sure I'd ever get it back. Can't sleep either. I spun around to find Dmitri in the doorway, wearing nothing but black sleep pants that hung low on his hips. In the dim light filtering through the windows, I could see the tattoos covering his chest and arms, intricate designs that looked Russian, religious icons mixed with predatory animals, and phrases in Cyrillic script. But what caught my attention were the scars, so many scars, crisscrossing his torso like a roadmap of violence. "I didn't mean to disturb you," I said, pulling my borrowed robe tighter around myself. "You didn't." He moved into the room with that same predatory grace, making the space feel suddenly smaller. "I don't sleep much. Occupational hazard. Too many enemies. Too many ghosts." He came to stand beside me at the window, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his bare skin. "Do you want to know why I was at your diner tonight, Elena?" I wasn't sure I did, but I nodded anyway. "My father used to take me there when I was a child. Before the empire, before the power, before everything became blood and money and impossible choices. We'd sit in that back booth and he'd let me order whatever I wanted, pancakes at midnight, pie for breakfast. He'd tell me stories about the old country, about honor and loyalty and what it meant to be a man." Dimitri's voice was distant, lost in memory. It was the only place he was just my father. Not the pakan, not the boss, just Papa. Something in my chest tightened painfully. "When did he die?" 3 years ago. Heart attack." A bitter smile twisted his lips. "Not a bullet. Not a betrayal. Just his body giving up after 70 years of carrying too much weight. I've been going to that diner ever since. Always at 3 a.m., always the same booth. Trying to feel close to him again. I'm sorry," I whispered, meaning it. "Don't be. He built this empire on blood, taught me that power is the only thing that matters. that sentiment is weakness, that you control, or you're controlled. He turned to look at me then, his eyes reflecting the city lights. And then you, a waitress who makes minimum wage and probably can't afford next month's rent. You threw yourself in front of a bullet for a man you don't know, for a monster you should fear. You did what no one in my world would ever do. You chose someone else's life over your own safety, without hesitation, without calculation, without expecting anything in return. It was stupid, I said, my voice breaking slightly. It was extraordinary. His hand came up to cup my face, tilting it toward him. It was everything I've been taught doesn't exist. And now I have to keep you alive, Elena. Because the alternative, the thought of those men putting their hands on you, hurting you because of me, it's not acceptable. It's not survivable. You barely know me. I know you're brave. I know you're proud. I know you work yourself to exhaustion and still smile at drunk customers at 3 a.m. I know you yanked me under a table and probably saved my life without a second thought. His thumb traced my cheekbone. I know that in the 5 hours since I met you, you've managed to become the most dangerous thing in my world. How? I breathed. Because I already can't let you go. The confession hung between us, heavy and electric. I should have been terrified, should have pushed him away and demanded he return me to my life, but standing there in his guest room with the city spread below us like a field of fallen stars, I couldn't deny the pull between us. Magnetic, irresistible, completely insane. This is going to end badly. I whispered, probably. He agreed. Then he leaned down and pressed his forehead to mine, his breath warm against my lips. But right now, you're alive. I'm alive. And for the first time in 3 years, I feel something other than emptiness. So maybe it's worth it. He pulled back before I could respond, before I could make the mistake of closing the distance between us. Try to sleep, Elena. Tomorrow, everything changes. He left me alone with my racing heart, and the growing certainty that he was right. I was already his, whether I wanted to be or not. Morning came too quickly and not quickly enough. I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the disorienting luxury of Egyptian cotton sheets against my skin. For a moment, I forgot where I was, forgot the gunshots, the blood, the gray-eyed man who'd claimed me with nothing but words and certainty. Then reality crashed back, and with it, the weight of everything I'd lost in a single night. There was a knock at the door, soft, respectful. Miss Elena? A woman's voice, accented but gentle. Mr. Volkov asked me to bring you breakfast and help you get settled. I pulled on the robe and opened the door to find a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair, pulled into a neat bun. She held a tray laden with food that smelled like heaven, fresh pastries, fruit, coffee in a delicate porcelain cup. I'm Irina, she said, moving past me to set the tray on the small table by the window. I manage Mr. Volkov's household. He said you might need some assistance this morning. I started, then stopped, because I did need help. I had nothing but a borrowed robe and the memory of my ruined uniform. Thank you. Irina's smile was warm, maternal. Your belongings arrived an hour ago. I've unpacked everything in the closet. Mr. Volkov also had some additional items sent over. Clothes, shoes, toiletries. He wasn't sure of your size, so there's variety. If anything doesn't fit, I can have it exchanged. I walked to the closet and opened it, my breath catching. Where last night there had been a few generic pieces, now hung dozens of outfits, jeans and blouses, dresses ranging from casual to elegant, even workout clothes. Everything still had tags, designer labels I recognized from magazines but had never imagined touching. This is too much, I whispered. Mr. Volkov is generous with those under his protection. Irina's tone was carefully neutral, but I caught something underneath. Approval, maybe, or relief. He's in his office. He asked that you join him when you're ready. After she left, I ate mechanically, tasting nothing. The coffee was perfect, rich and strong, nothing like the burnt sludge at the diner. I showered in a bathroom that was larger than my entire apartment had been. using products that probably cost more than my weekly paycheck. Then I dressed in dark jeans and a soft cream sweater, simple but well made, and forced myself to face whatever came next. Victor, the guard from last night, stood outside my door. He was massive, with a shaved head and a scar bisecting his left eyebrow. But when he saw me, he nodded with something like respect. "This way, Miss Elena." He led me through the apartment to a set of double doors at the far end. Inside, Dmitri sat behind an enormous desk, 3 computer monitors glowing before him, papers spread across the polished surface. He looked up when I entered, and something shifted in his expression. Softened, warmed. "Elena, good morning." He stood, buttoning his suit jacket, navy today, with a crisp white shirt that made his eyes look even more striking. "Did you sleep?" "Some." "A lie. It's too much. The clothes, it's necessary." He came around the desk, leaning against it casually. "You can't leave this apartment until I've handled the situation. That could be days, possibly weeks. You need to be comfortable." "Weeks?" My voice cracked on the word. "I have a life, Dmitri. A job. Bills." "Had," he corrected gently. "You had a job. The diner is closed indefinitely. Structural damage from last night. As for bills," he gestured to a folder on his desk, "everything's been handled. Student loans, credit cards, medical debt from your grandmother's final hospital stay. It's done." The room tilted. "You had no right. I had every right." His voice hardened slightly. "You're under my protection, which means you're my responsibility. That includes ensuring you're not worried about debt collectors while I'm trying to keep you alive. So I'm what? Your charity case? Your kept woman?" The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. Something dangerous flashed through his eyes. In 2 strides, he was in front of me, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. "You're not my kept woman. You're not my charity case. You're the woman who saved my life. And in my world, that debt is sacred. More than sacred. It's absolute. Everything I have, everything I am, is bound to you now until that debt is paid. I don't want your money. I don't want any of this." "Then what do you want, Elena?" He leaned closer, his voice dropping to something rough and intimate. "To go back to that diner? To work yourself to exhaustion for tips and crude comments? To live in that apartment with the broken heat and the landlord who looks at you like you're something he can take?" His hand came up to cup my jaw, thumb brushing my cheekbone. "Or do you want what I saw in your eyes last night? Freedom. Safety. A life where you're not invisible." "I don't know what I want," I whispered, hating how true it was. "Then let me protect you while you figure it out." His forehead nearly touched mine, his breath warm against my lips. "Let me keep you safe, keep you comfortable, keep you alive. And when this is over, when Sergei is no longer a threat, you can decide. Stay or go. Your choice. I'll give you money, a new identity if you want, anywhere in the world. But right now, right this moment, you're mine to protect." Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He pulled away, checking the screen, and his expression went cold, lethal. "They found Sergei. I shouldn't have been in the car. Definitely shouldn't have been allowed anywhere near whatever was about to happen." But Dmitri had looked at me with those storm-gray eyes and said, "You deserve to see the man who tried to kill you." And somehow I'd agreed. Now I sat in the back of the SUV, wedged between Dmitri and Victor, as we drove to an address in Red Hook. The warehouse district, where shipping containers stacked like children's blocks, and the smell of salt and rust hung heavy in the air. "What's going to happen?" I asked, my voice small in the vehicle's silence. "Justice," Dmitri said simply. "You mean revenge. In my world, they're the same thing." He took my hand, the first time he'd initiated such simple contact, threading his fingers through mine. "You don't have to watch. You can stay in the car." But I found myself shaking my head. "No. You're right. I deserve to see him." The warehouse was nondescript from the outside, but inside, it was clearly used for purposes that had nothing to do with legitimate shipping. Dimitri's men were everywhere, at least a dozen, all armed, all watching us with the same careful deference they'd shown at the diner. In the center of the space, tied to a chair, was Sergei. He looked worse for wear, the bullet wound in his shoulder seeping through makeshift bandages, his face swollen from what had clearly been an enthusiastic interrogation. When he saw Dmitri, something like fear flashed through his eyes before pride muscled it aside. "Volkov," he spat, literally, blood and saliva hitting the concrete floor. "Come to finish it?" "That depends on you." Dmitri's voice was conversational, almost pleasant, which somehow made it more terrifying. He pulled out his phone, swiping through screens before turning it toward Sergei. "Do you know what this is?" Sergei squinted at the screen, then went pale. "That's your daughter, Anya, 16 years old, currently attending St. Catherine's Academy in Prague. Excellent student. Loves ballet." Dmitri's smile was a razor blade. "She has no idea what her father does for a living, does she? Thinks you're an import-export, which technically you are, just not the legal kind. You wouldn't," Sergei breathed. "She's a child. And Elena is an innocent waitress who did nothing but work an honest job. Yet you were perfectly willing to kill her last night as collateral damage." Dmitri pocketed his phone. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me everything. Who sent you? Why now? What they know about my operations. And in exchange, I'll let you live. Your daughter continues her safe, sheltered life. You disappear. Maybe Alaska, maybe Argentina, somewhere far away where you're no longer my problem. And if I refuse, then I make you watch while I systematically dismantle everything you love. Your daughter, your mother in Kiev, your brother and his family. Not killed. That would be too merciful. Just ruined. Financially, socially, psychologically. They'll spend the rest of their lives wondering what they did to deserve such complete destruction." He leaned down, getting close to Sergei's bloodied face. "I am a patient man, Sergei. I can make this last years, or you can talk, and end it in the next 10 minutes. Your choice." The silence stretched. Then Sergei's shoulders sagged, defeat written in every line of his body. "Konstantin sent me," he whispered. "Konstantin Fedorov. He's trying to move into your territory. Thinks you're weak after your father's death. The shipment you intercepted, it was a test. He wanted to see how you'd respond. And the attack last night? Desperation. You were supposed to meet with the Italians, negotiate new borders. He wanted you dead before that meeting could happen. Create chaos. Swoop in during the confusion." Sergei looked up, something like pleading in his eyes. "I told him it was suicide going after you directly. But he's old guard. Doesn't understand that you're not your father. You're worse." Dmitri straightened, considering. Then he nodded to Victor. "Get him patched up properly. New identity, $50,000, and a one-way ticket to somewhere with no extradition. If I ever see him again, or if he ever contacts anyone from his old life, the deal is void." He turned to leave, pulling me with him. But Sergei's voice stopped us. "The girl," he said, looking at me for the first time with something that might have been remorse. "I'm sorry. You were never supposed to be part of this." "But I am," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my voice. "Because I chose to be, and I'd do it again." Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. Dmitri helped me into the SUV with careful hands, then slid in beside me. As we pulled away, he kept my hand in his thumb tracing absent patterns on my palm. "You handled that well," he said quietly. "I wanted to throw up, but you didn't. You stood there, faced the man who tried to kill you, and you didn't flinch." He brought my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my knuckles that sent electricity racing up my arm. "You're stronger than you think, Elena." "I don't feel strong. I don't know what I feel. That's normal. The adrenaline crash. It'll pass." He pulled me closer, tucking me against his side in a gesture that felt both protective and possessive. "When we get back, Irina will make you tea, you'll eat something, and you'll rest. Tomorrow, we deal with Konstantin." "We?" I looked up at him. "I thought I was supposed to stay hidden." "You are. But Konstantin knowing I have someone I'm protecting, that changes the game. He'll try to use you against me, which means we need to be smart, strategic. His arm tightened around me, and it means I'm not letting you out of my sight. The penthouse felt different when we returned. Less like a prison, more like a sanctuary. Irina did indeed make tea, and I found myself curled up on the enormous couch with a cashmere throw, watching the city lights blink on as darkness fell. Dmitri worked at his desk, making calls, typing, orchestrating whatever complex web of power and violence his world required. But every few minutes, his eyes would find me, checking, confirming I was still there, still safe. "Can I ask you something?" I said during one of these visual check-ins. He looked up, giving me his full attention. "Anything. Why do you do this? The violence, the crime, all of it. You're clearly intelligent, educated. You could do anything." He was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he stood and came to sit beside me on the couch, close enough that our thighs touched. My father came to America with nothing but the clothes on his back, and a reputation for being the most vicious enforcer in Moscow. He built an empire on fear and blood because that was the only currency he knew, and he raised me to take over that empire, trained me from childhood to be exactly what I am, a weapon, a leader, a monster. He took my hand, studying it like it held secrets. By the time I was old enough to question whether there might be another path, I was already too deep. Too many people depended on me, too many enemies wanted me dead, too many responsibilities I couldn't walk away from without destroying everything my father built. That sounds like an excuse. Maybe it is. He met my eyes unflinching. Or maybe it's the truth. I've killed people, Elena, ordered deaths, destroyed lives, done things that would make you run screaming if you knew the details. But I've also protected neighborhoods, kept drugs out of schools, made sure the elderly in Brighton Beach don't get evicted when they can't pay rent. It's not all darkness, but the darkness is there, and I won't pretend otherwise. I should be afraid of you. You should be terrified. His hand came up to cup my face. But you're not. Why? I thought about it. Really thought about it. Because when you look at me, I don't feel invisible. And maybe that makes me just as dangerous as you are. Something shifted in his expression. Heat, hunger, recognition. He leaned closer, his lips nearly brushing mine, his voice rough. "Elena." The moment shattered as his phone rang, the sound harsh and intrusive. He cursed in Russian, checking the screen, and his face went hard. "What is it?" I asked Konstantin. He stood, pacing, his whole body tense with barely controlled violence. "He's calling for a sit-down, tomorrow night. Says he wants to negotiate terms before things get messy. Is that good?" "It's a trap." He turned to face me, and what I saw in his eyes made my blood run cold. But it's also an opportunity, a chance to end this before it escalates into war, before more people die, before he has time to target you directly. "What are you going to do?" He came back to me, kneeling so we were eye level, taking both my hands in his. "I'm going to go to that meeting. I'm going to sit across from the man who tried to have me killed, who put you in danger, and I'm going to negotiate. And if negotiations fail," his jaw tightened, "then I'm going to make sure he never threatens anyone I care about ever again." The weight of those words, "anyone I care about," settled between us like a promise and a curse. "I don't want you to die for me," I whispered. "Then we're even," he said, his thumb brushing my cheek, "because I don't want you to die for me either." But here we are. The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Dmitri was different, distant, cold. His mind clearly on the meeting ahead. He spent hours in his office with various men who came and went like shadows, their voices low and urgent behind closed doors. I caught fragments of Russian, Italian, words I didn't understand, but that carried the weight of violence and strategy. Irina tried to keep me occupied. She taught me how to make proper borscht, showed me photo albums from when Dmitri was young. A serious child with those same gray eyes, always standing slightly apart from other children, even then marked by something that set him apart. His father loomed in many of the photos, a bear of a man with Dmitri's features, but harder, crueler. He was never allowed to be a child, Irina said softly, closing the album. Alexander, Mr. Volkov's father, he believed sentiment was weakness, trained Dmitri like a soldier from the time he could walk, The boy learned to shoot before he learned to ride a bicycle. That's horrible. That's survival. She patted my hand. But you make him remember he's human. I see it in how he looks at you, like you're sunlight, and he's been living in darkness so long he forgot what warmth felt like. The words stayed with me as evening approached. I dressed carefully, choosing a simple black dress from the collection Dimitri had provided. Elegant, but understated, with long sleeves and a hem that fell just above my knees. I wasn't going to the meeting, but somehow it felt important to look worthy. Of what? I couldn't say. When I emerged from my room, Dimitri was waiting in the living room. He wore a black suit that fit him like a second skin, his hair perfectly styled, a watch on his wrist that probably cost more than a car. But it was his eyes that caught me, storm clouds gathering, dangerous and beautiful. You look. He trailed off, his gaze traveling over me with an intensity that made my skin heat. Presentable? I offered. Devastating. He closed the distance between us, his hands settling on my waist like they belonged there. I need you to promise me something. What? If something goes wrong tonight, if I don't come back, or if someone gets past my security, Victor will take you to a safe house in Connecticut. There's money there, documents, everything you need to disappear. Promise me you'll go. Promise me you'll survive. Fear clawed at my throat. Dimitri. Promise me, Elena. His forehead pressed against mine, his breath warm and unsteady. I can face Constantine. I can face whatever comes, but I can't do it if I'm worried you won't save yourself if things go wrong. I promise, I whispered, even though we both knew it might be a lie. He kissed my forehead, lingering, then my cheeks, his lips soft against my skin. When he finally pulled back, his control was visibly fraying. I'll come back to you. You better. He left with Victor and 4 other guards, the apartment suddenly feeling cavernous and empty without him. I tried to read, to watch television, to do anything but think about what was happening across the city, but every minute dragged like hours, and fear sat heavy in my chest like a stone. Around 11 p.m., my phone buzzed. A new number I didn't recognize. Stay away from the windows. Lock yourself in the master bedroom. Do not open the door for anyone but Victor. My heart stopped. Something had gone wrong. I ran to the master bedroom, Dimitri's room, which I'd never entered before. It was sparse, masculine, dominated by an enormous bed with black silk sheets, but I didn't have time to process the intimacy of being in his personal space. I locked the door, then dragged a heavy chair in front of it for good measure. Minutes passed. 10. 20. The silence was suffocating. Then I heard it. The apartment door opening. Footsteps, multiple sets, voices speaking low and urgent. Clear the rooms. She has to be here somewhere. Not Victor's voice. Not anyone I recognized. They'd gotten past Dimitri's security. They were inside. I looked around desperately for a weapon, finding nothing but expensive furniture and books. Then I saw it. In the nightstand drawer, a handgun. My hands shook as I picked it up, having no idea if it was loaded, if the safety was on, if I could actually pull the trigger if it came to that. The footsteps grew closer. A door opened down the hall, the guest room probably, then another. Getting closer. Boss said she'd be here, Volkov's new pet. Find her, and we have leverage. The doorknob rattled. I raised the gun, pointing it at the door with both hands like I'd seen in movies, trying to steady my breathing. Miss Elena? A different voice, accented and almost gentle. My name is Constantine. I mean you no harm. I simply wish to talk. Go away. My voice came out steadier than I felt. I cannot do that. You see, Dmitri Volkov has something of mine, and I need insurance to get it back. You're that insurance. A pause. But I'm a reasonable man. Come out, and I promise no harm will come to you. You have my word. The word of a man who sent someone to kill me? I laughed, high and slightly hysterical. Forgive me if I don't trust that. Fair point. I could hear the smile in his voice. Let me try another approach. Either you open this door, or my men will break it down. Either way, we're coming in. But if you make this difficult, I can't guarantee we'll be gentle about it. The lock rattled again, more violently. They were picking it. I closed my eyes, said a prayer to a god I wasn't sure I believed in, and made a choice. I fired through the door. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space, the recoil nearly knocking me backward. Outside, someone screamed, a man's voice, high with pain and surprise. She shot me. The crazy bitch shot me. Fall back. Constantine's voice, no longer gentle, sharp with command. Regroup. She's armed. More footsteps running this time. Away from the door, away from me. I heard arguing in Russian, someone crying out in pain, then, blessed silence. I stood frozen, the gun still raised, my whole body shaking so badly I could barely breathe. Minutes passed, or hours. Time had lost all meaning. Then new sounds. The apartment door slamming open, shouting, but this time I recognized Victor's voice. Clear! Miss Elena, it's Victor. Are you safe? I couldn't move. Couldn't speak. My finger was still on the trigger, my eyes fixed on the bullet hole in the expensive door. Elena. A different voice. Dimitri's voice. Alive. Whole. Elena, open the door. It's safe now, please. Open the door. Somehow I made my legs work. I moved the chair, unlocked the door, and pulled it open. Dimitri stood there, his suit spattered with blood that probably wasn't his face pale with an emotion I'd never seen before, terror. When he saw me, something in him seemed to break. He pulled me against him, one hand cradling the back of my head, the other wrapped around my waist so tightly I could barely breathe. You're safe, he murmured into my hair, his voice rough and unsteady. You're safe. I'm here. You're safe. I shot someone, I said numbly. I think I shot someone. Good. He pulled back just enough to cut my face, his eyes searching mine frantically. Did they touch you? Did they hurt you? No. Your text, I locked myself in here. They tried to break in, but I looked at the gun still clutched in my hand. I didn't know if it would work. He took the gun gently, setting it aside, then pulled me back against him. Over his shoulder, I could see Victor and another guard dragging a body out of the hallway, the man I'd shot, clutching his leg and moaning, not dead then. Somehow that made it worse. How did they get past security? I asked. Inside man. Someone Constantine paid off. Dimitri's jaw clenched. He's being dealt with. But Elena, I'm so sorry. This never should have happened. My security should have been impenetrable. You should never have been in danger. I failed you. You came back. I fisted my hands in his jacket, needing to feel he was real, solid, alive. That's what matters. The meeting was a setup. Constantine brought twice the men agreed upon, tried to take me hostage. We fought our way out, but while I was dealing with him, his second team came here. His arms tightened around me. He wanted to use you against me, wanted to take you and force me to surrender my territory, my operations, everything. What happened to Constantine? Something dark crossed Dimitri's face. He won't be a problem anymore. I didn't ask for details, didn't want to know, because I was starting to understand that this was what loving someone in Dimitri's world meant: blood and violence and constant danger, the price of choosing him over safety. Loving him. The realization hit me like ice water. Somewhere between yanking him under that table and shooting through a door to protect myself so I could see him again, I'd fallen in love with a monster. I can't do this, I whispered. Dimitri went very still. What? This. Your world. Men breaking into your apartment, shooting through doors, living every day wondering if you'll come home, or if someone will kill you. I pulled back to look at him, tears streaming down my face. I'm just a waitress, Dimitri. I serve coffee and smile at rude customers. I'm not built for this. I'm not strong enough. You shot a man through a door to defend yourself, he said fiercely. You saved my life. You've survived things in the last 48 hours that would break most people. Don't tell me you're not strong enough, but I'm scared. All the time. Terrified. So am I. The confession seemed torn from him. Every second you're in danger because of me, I'm terrified. But Elena, I can't let you go. I've tried to tell myself I could, that I'd give you money and papers, and let you disappear to live a safe, normal life. But I can't. The thought of not seeing you, Not having you near, not being able to protect you, it's not survivable. That's not love, Dimitri. That's obsession. Maybe. He pulled me back against him, his heart hammering against my ear. Or maybe it's both. Maybe I'm obsessed with you and in love with you, and terrified of losing you all at the same time. Maybe I've been half alive for 3 years, and you made me remember what it feels like to be whole. To want something beyond power and revenge and empty victories. I wanted to pull away, wanted to demand he take me somewhere safe and let me go, but my traitorous body melted against him, seeking his warmth, his strength, the security of his arms around me. I need time, I said finally. Time to think. Time to figure out if I can really live this life. How much time? I don't know. A few days? A week? He pulled back, cupping my face with both hands. Take as long as you need, but while you're deciding, you're staying here. Under my protection. With me. And Elena, his thumbs brushed away my tears. I'm going to do everything in my power to convince you to stay. Not because I own you. Not because of debt or obligation. But because I'm falling in love with you. And I hope, you might feel the same. Before I could respond, he kissed me. Not gently, not tentatively. With all the desperate hunger and fear and relief of the last 2 hours, his lips claiming mine like he was drowning and I was air. I kissed him back just as desperately, my hands fisting in his hair, tasting blood and whiskey and something that was purely him. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. Stay tonight, he whispered. Just tonight. Sleep here, in my bed, where I can know you're safe. Please. I should have said no. Should have maintained boundaries, distance, some semblance of control, but I was exhausted and terrified, and still shaking from adrenaline, and the thought of being alone was unbearable. Just sleeping, I said. Just sleeping, he agreed. We lay down together on his bed, still fully clothed, his arms wrapped around me from behind. His face pressed into my hair, his breath warm against my neck. Outside, I could hear Victor and the other guards cleaning up, making phone calls, restoring order to chaos, but here, in Dimitri's arms, with his heartbeat steady against my back, I felt something I hadn't felt since that first gunshot shattered my world. Safe. Thank you, he murmured into the darkness, for trusting me, for staying, for being brave enough to shoot through a door. I was terrified. I know, but you did it anyway. That's what courage is, being afraid, and doing what needs to be done regardless. His arms tightened. Sleep, Elena. I'll keep watch. You need to sleep too. I will. After I'm sure you're resting. After I've memorized the way you feel in my arms. After I've thanked whatever God put you in that diner at 3 a.m. and made you brave enough to save a monster's life. I wanted to tell him he wasn't a monster. Wanted to promise I'd stay. Wanted to admit that I was already in too deep to save myself, but exhaustion pulled at me, and his warmth was a drug, and for the first time in days, I felt the tight knot of fear in my chest begin to loosen. As I drifted off, I felt him press a kiss to my temple, his voice a rough whisper. Mine. I woke to sunlight, and the realization that sometime during the night, we'd tangled together completely. Dimitri's leg was thrown over mine, his arm across my waist, his face buried in the curve of my neck. His breath was slow and even. Actually asleep, finally. In sleep, he looked younger, the harsh lines of command and violence softened into something almost vulnerable. I could see the boy from Marina's photos, the child who'd never been allowed to just be a child. I knew I should move, should extract myself before this became more complicated than it already was. But I found myself studying him instead. The thick, dark lashes against his cheeks, the slight curve of his lips, the scar that cut through his left eyebrow. Evidence of a life lived in violence, worn like badges of survival. His eyes opened slowly, focusing on me with an intensity that stole my breath. For a moment, neither of us moved, caught in that liminal space between sleeping and waking, where truth lives unguarded. Hi, I whispered. Hi. His voice was rough with sleep, and he made no move to untangle from me. How do you feel? Confused, scared, safe. I touched his face, tracing that scar with my fingertip. How did you get this? My father. I was 12, questioned one of his orders in front of his men. He backhanded me with his ring hand. The ring caught and tore. His eyes never left mine. He said it would remind me that respect is earned through strength, not sentiment. That's horrible. That was my life. He caught my hand, pressing a kiss to my palm. Until you. You make me want to be something different. Someone who deserves the way you look at me. How do I look at you? Like I'm human. Like I'm worth saving. His thumb traced my lower lip. Like you see past the monster to something redeemable underneath. Maybe I do, I admitted. Or maybe I'm fooling myself. Maybe this is just Stockholm Syndrome or adrenaline or... He kissed me, swallowing the rest of my words. Different from last night. Slower, deeper, a question rather than a demand. I melted into it, my hands sliding into his hair, my body arching against his. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. That didn't feel like Stockholm Syndrome, he murmured against my lips. No, I agreed. It didn't. We lay there for a while longer, not speaking, just existing in each other's space. Eventually, reality intruded. Phones buzzing, the sounds of the household waking, the weight of decisions still unmade. I need to tell you something, Dmitri said, propping himself up on one elbow to look down at me. About your father. I went cold. My father left when I was 6. I don't even remember him. I know. His name was Marcus Chen. He worked for my father. Low-level, collection and enforcement in Chinatown. Dimitri's expression was careful, watching for my reaction. He was killed 15 years ago. Execution style. They never found who did it. The room tilted. What? I didn't know until yesterday. I had my people run a complete background on you. Standard security protocol. When I saw his name, I recognized it from my father's old files. Marcus Chen was killed on my father's orders. I sat up, pulling away from him, my whole body numb. Your father killed my father? Yes. Marcus was skimming money, small amounts over several months. In our world, that's an unforgivable betrayal. My father made an example of him. Dmitri sat up too, but didn't try to touch me. I'm telling you, because you deserve the truth, all of it. Even the parts that might make you hate me. Did you know him? My father? I was 11 when he died. I met him maybe twice. I don't remember clearly. But Elena, I need you to understand. I'm not my father. I've done terrible things, but I would never hurt you. Never. What happened to your father? That's a sin I carry, that my family carries, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make amends for it. I thought about my mother, working herself to death trying to raise me alone. About growing up poor, invisible. Always one paycheck from disaster. About the hole in my life where a father should have been. He wasn't a good man, I said finally. My mother told me that much. He was violent, unpredictable. She was relieved when he left, even though it meant struggling alone. I looked at Dmitri, really looked at him. I should hate you for this, for what your family took from me. I know. But I don't. Maybe I'm broken. Maybe watching you nearly die and shooting a man through a door broke something fundamental in me. But I don't hate you, Dmitri. I need to understand why you're telling me this now. Because I love you. The words were simple, absolute. And love built on lies isn't love at all. If you're going to stay, if you're going to choose this life, choose me. It has to be with full knowledge of what you're choosing. The violence, the danger, the blood on my family's hands, all of it. And if I can't accept it, pain flashed through his eyes, but he kept his voice steady. Then I let you go. I give you enough money to start over anywhere in the world, a new identity, complete protection. You'll be free. You said you couldn't let me go. I lied. He reached out, cupping my face with heartbreaking gentleness. I can survive losing you if it means you're safe and happy. What I can't survive is keeping you prisoner in a life you hate, watching you slowly wither because I was too selfish to give you a choice. The confession broke something open in my chest, because that that willingness to sacrifice his own happiness for mine. That was love. Real, messy, complicated love. I want to meet her, I said. Meet who? Your mother. Your family. Anyone who matters to you. I took his hand, threading our fingers together. If I'm going to make this choice, I need to understand your world completely. Not just the violence and danger, but the people, the connections, the reasons you can't just walk away. Hope flickered across his face. Elena. I'm not promising anything, I interrupted. But I'm not running either. I'm choosing to see, to understand, and then I'll decide. He kissed me again, soft and reverent, like I was something precious he was afraid to break. My mother lives in Brighton Beach. We can go today if you want. I want. Brighton Beach was a world away from Manhattan. Russian signs on storefronts. The smell of the ocean mixing with grilled meat and dark bread. Elderly women in headscarves gossiping on benches. Dimitri's mother lived in a modest brownstone, the kind of place that spoke of old money carefully maintained rather than flashy new wealth. Svetlana Volkova was not what I expected. Petite, elegant, with silver hair and Dimitri's same gray eyes, she opened the door and immediately pulled me into a hug that smelled like vanilla and roses. Finally, she said in accented English, pulling back to study my face. Finally, my stubborn son brings home a woman worth bringing home. Mama, Dimitri said, something like embarrassment coloring his voice. Hush, go make tea. I want to talk to Elena alone. He looked at me, questioning. I nodded, and he disappeared into the house, leaving me alone with his mother in a living room full of family photos and religious icons. Sit, Svetlana commanded gently, settling into a chair across from me. He told me what happened, the diner, Konstantin, all of it. He also told me he's in love with you. He told you that? Dimitri tells me everything. I'm the only person in the world he trusts completely. She leaned forward, taking my hands in hers. So I'm going to tell you something I've never told anyone else. I begged Alexander to leave this life. When Dimitri was born, I begged him to take our money, move somewhere safe, give our son a normal life. Do you know what he said? I shook my head. He said men like him don't get to retire. That the empire was in our blood, our legacy, our curse. That Dimitri was born to this, and it would be a betrayal to deny him his birthright. Her eyes filled with tears. I failed my son. I let him be raised as a weapon when he should have been raised as a boy. But Elena, you can save him. You already have, in ways that matter more than bullets and violence. I'm not a savior. You're the first person who saw him as human first, powerful second. The first person he's ever protected because he loves them, not because they're assets or obligations. She squeezed my hands. And you're brave enough to stand in his world without being crushed by it. I saw the police report. You shot through a door at armed intruders. You didn't freeze, didn't collapse. You fought. I was terrified. So was I, every day of my marriage. But I stayed because I loved Alexander despite everything. Because sometimes love means choosing the person over the circumstances. The heart over the head. She released my hands, sitting back. But I'm not telling you to stay. That's your choice. I'm just telling you that if you do stay, you'll have family. Me, Irina, the people who've watched Dimitri grow up. We'll protect you as fiercely as he does. Dimitri returned with tea, and we spent the afternoon listening to Svetlana's stories, the good ones, about holidays and small moments of normalcy carved out of a violent life, about Dimitri's love of books as a child, his gift for languages, the way he'd sneak out to feed stray dogs, even though his father said it showed weakness. As we drove back to Manhattan, I felt something settling in my chest. Not certainty, but the beginning of it. A sense that maybe, impossibly, I could belong in this world. Thank you, Dimitri said quietly, for meeting her, for trying to understand. She loves you very much. I know. It's why I can't walk away from this life. Too many people depend on me, need me. The empire my father built, it employs thousands of people, legitimate businesses mixed with the illegal ones, families with mortgages and children, and futures tied to my decisions. If I fall, they all fall. That's a heavy burden. It is, but it's mine to carry. He glanced at me, then back to the road. Have you decided? Not yet, but I'm close. That night we cooked dinner together, a surreal domestic scene in his expensive kitchen. He taught me how to make proper pelmeni, his hands guiding mine, flour dusting our clothes, laughter surprising us both. We ate at his dining table, talking about nothing important, favorite books, childhood memories, dreams we'd both thought were dead. After dinner, he led me to the massive windows overlooking the city. The lights sprawled before us, infinite and beautiful, a tapestry of lives intersecting and diverging. I have something for you, he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. My heart stopped. Dimitri. It's not a ring. Not yet. He opened the box to reveal a delicate gold necklace with a small pendant. A key. If you stay, I want you to have this. It's a key to this apartment, to my home in the Hamptons, to everything I own, not as my prisoner or my possession, but as my partner, my equal, the person I trust with everything I am. I took the necklace, the gold warm in my palm, and if I go, then keep it anyway, as a reminder that somewhere in this city, there's a man who loves you enough to let you leave, and if you ever need anything, money, protection, help of any kind, that key opens doors, always. I looked at the key, at the city, at Dimitri's face in the reflected lights. I thought about my old life, invisible, exhausted, going through motions without really living. I thought about these last few days, terrifying, dangerous, but more alive than I'd felt in years. I'm not the same person who walked into that diner, I said slowly. The Elena who served coffee and smiled at rude customers, she doesn't exist anymore. You changed me. This changed me. I know. I'm sorry. Don't be. I turned to face him fully. Because the person I am now, she's stronger, braver. She knows what she wants. And what does she want? I reached up, pulling his face down to mine. She wants the impossible. She wants the monster and the man. The violence and the tenderness. She wants to be terrified and safe all at once. She wants you, Dmitri Volkov, in all your complicated, dangerous, beautiful entirety. The kiss was different this time, not desperate or questioning, but certain. A promise, a commitment, a choice made with full knowledge of its consequences. When we finally broke apart, he fastened the necklace around my throat, his fingers lingering on my skin. You're sure? No, I admitted. I'm terrified. But I'm sure about you, about us, about choosing this life even though it's insane and dangerous and nothing like what I planned. What did you plan? Something safe, something ordinary, something that wouldn't require shooting through doors or falling in love with mafia bosses. I smiled, feeling it reach my eyes for the first time in days. But that woman, the one who wanted safe and ordinary, she would have died slowly, invisibly. This woman, I touched the key at my throat. She gets to live, really live. He pulled me close, his arms around me, his heartbeat steady against my ear. I love you, Elena Chen. I will spend every day for the rest of my life protecting you, cherishing you, making sure you never regret this choice. I love you too, I whispered. God help me, I love you too. We stood there, wrapped in each other, as the city sparkled below us. Somewhere out there, danger still lurked. There would always be danger in Dimitri's world. But there would also be this, moments of peace carved out of chaos, love blooming in impossible circumstances, two people who'd found each other against all odds. 6 months later, I stood in Dimitri's study, reviewing security reports like it was the most natural thing in the world. I'd learned the business, the connections, the delicate balance of power that kept the empire running. I'd also started taking night classes, criminal justice, ironically enough, understanding the system from both sides. Dimitri looked up from his desk, smiling that rare smile he reserved only for me. What are you thinking about? About how I yanked a mafia boss under a table and ended up running his empire with him. Co-running, he corrected. You're much better at negotiations than I am. Less likely to shoot people. Give me time. I teased. He stood, pulling me against him, and I melted into the embrace that had become my home. Any regrets? I thought about it honestly. The fear was still there, probably always would be. The danger was real, but so was the love, the partnership, the sense of purpose I'd found in this impossible life. Not a single one, I said, and meant it. Because sometimes the best lives are the ones we never planned. Sometimes love means choosing the dangerous path over the safe one. And sometimes, yanking a stranger under a table to save his life means saving your own in the process. The key at my throat caught the light as Dimitri kissed me, and I thought about that first night, exhausted, invisible, wiping down the same stain for the third time. That woman would never recognize the woman I'd become, but she would, I hoped, be proud of the choice I'd made, to be seen, to be loved, to be brave enough to reach for something extraordinary, even when it looked like madness from the outside. Dimitri's phone buzzed with some new crisis requiring attention, and I pulled away with a sigh. Work? Always. He kissed my forehead. But tonight, we're having dinner with Mama. Just family. Family, I repeated, letting the word settle warm in my chest. I liked the sound of that. As he returned to his calls and I to my reports, I caught my reflection in the window. Confident, capable, no longer invisible. And behind my reflection, the city sparkled with infinite possibilities. Each light a life, each life a story, and ours the most unlikely of all. The waitress who'd yanked a mafia boss under a table. The monster who'd learned to be human again. Two impossible people building an impossible love in an impossible world. And somehow, impossible